Okay. So I haven't really done stuff like this before, but then again, it doesn't seem that too many people have done or attempted to do this with D. Let me get that out of here. Um, so really quick, what is D? D is a statically typed systems level programming language. It's been around for 15 plus years. Um, I've heard from a few people that it was actually a thing in the late 90s as early as then, but honestly, I'm not sure. So the problem with the main problem is that despite being a wonderful language, it has some ecosystem issues and it has frankly gatekeeping issues. There's very little content. Actually, I've not been able to find any um, that is taught well. Don't get me wrong, there's documentation, but the documentation, even for extremely simple things, it speaks about those things in a manner that isn't at all relative to the complexity of what it's speaking about. Um, and to me, that's a bit weird. To me, the cornerstone of being a good teacher, or somebody who can teach well, is someone who explains the subject matter in a way that is relative to the complexity of what they're teaching. So, if you were to, I guess some arbitrary example would be if you were to explain um, how to write a hello world, right, in whatever language, and you were to go off and start just spouting random things, random, kind of higher level um, language specification things. Like, I've seen. I remember actually when I was first learning stuff, about 2010. There was a thread some guy had made on this forum that I was on, and he started speaking about templating in his introductory thread to this what would eventually be a series of threads from him on explaining uh, C++. And that is ridiculous. That's a very extreme example and had obviously no correlation. Um, so I picked up D about a month ago, probably 6 weeks ago now is when I first kind of installed everything and started looking through everything. And since then, what I've made has been um, just I think it's kind of okay. I think it's cool. Um, but they're just fun projects, right? So what I've made has been uh, malware POC. So very very basic work in progress proof of concept botnet. And then I've made this was to kind of get a hang of the Windows API within like using the Windows API from D and what it has, what it doesn't have. And this is a dynamic library based cheat for an FPS game. Um, the repository doesn't describe, like, it doesn't name the FPS game. There's no strings in the code that suggest what game it is for. It's purely meant to serve as a proof of concept. And this is just that. So, yeah, there's nothing here that you can, without already having written something like this for that game, there's nothing in this repository that you could infer what game it's for from the repo itself. And then I've started to work on this, which doesn't have much in it. This is something I'm actually writing out of necessity, not just because I want to. This is a more of a side contract based project that I'm doing um, that I was able to the folks that are handling the funds with this were kind enough to let me write it in D. So, I've also written. Um, this is actually pretty much nothing. This is all the D code that's in the project, but I was able to uh, get the time to read through some of the Vibe D documentation. And Vibe D is a uh, HTTP, like a, how do I say this? Vibe D is a web framework, basically. Um, it's not really like if you're coming from something like Django. It's a little bit lower level than that. Um, it's more about Flask-esque if you're coming from writing Python backends. But even then, those are very arbitrary, ballparkish comparisons being drawn. So I've also written some other stuff in D that I'm working on that I'll push up soon. But the TLDR is that I really like the language. There are a lot of issues with it, but there are a lot of issues with every language. And I think the primary issue with D has been unintentional gatekeeping, lack of marketing. The maintainers of D are much more interested with technical problems and tackling those than they are with telling people that their language exists. Most people who have been in the industry for the past 10 years have heard of D. They know what it is. And a lot of those people were excited about it when they first heard about it in 2010, which is when a lot of people that I've spoken to from my work had first heard about it. And then they never heard about it again. But why? I really do believe that this is a good language. I think it has a lot to offer, and I think people should be using it. Now, for background on me, is that I started learning how to program when I was 9. My uncle worked for Sun Microsystems, and he introduced me to Java at the time. I was 9. I didn't know what was happening, but I thought it was cool that things would appear on the screen. That's awesome. Fast forward 3 or 4 years. Actually, it was more like 4 or 5 years, and I really started to get into Java. And from Java, I got annoyed with the verbosity and really what happened is I figured out that other languages were not as they didn't require as much time to get that gratification, to get things working. And I at that point had no need for performance in any way. Whatever I was writing was simply for my own amusement. I didn't care about performance, and so Python was an obvious choice there. So I went into Python, and then since I already knew Python, I may as well, when I'm 15, 16, go get a job writing web servers, backend web development, and that quickly transitioned into full stack web development and development operations and stuff like that before I was 18. At that point, I stopped working a traditional job to play a video game called Overwatch, which I played professionally for 4.5 years, give or take. But I retired 14 months ago, and since then I have gotten a job writing Java, which I enjoy actually. Not the writing Java part. I'm actually indifferent with Java. I don't really mind. But the job itself, I quite enjoy. And yeah, I've been doing this programming thing for a good amount of time, but I don't have any delusions, any grandiose delusions of where I'm at. I have always just learned what I had to learn to do what was interesting to me at the time. And with that, a lot of the time I learn something in a way that's not optimal, which I later find out, be it I look at how somebody else did it, or I come across how somebody else did it more often than not. Maybe 2 or 3 months, sometimes 6 months after I, finish writing whatever it was, and then I say, oh, they did this much better than I did, and I take a mental note of that, and I keep that with me going to my next projects. And I think for me, that's been a great way of learning. It's helped me a lot. And so what I want to do with these videos is that I'll probably make most of them on the weekends, is that I want to explain the concepts of writing decode um, in a way that doesn't require you to have been a programmer for the past decade, in a way that avoids the pitfalls of, frankly, sometimes fully incorrect documentation, or the or the compiler messages for DMDs sometimes aren't great, and they can get really confusing. So my goal is to save you some headache, um, if you are intent on picking up the language. Um, and if you're not intent on picking up the language, you're just giving it a shot for fun. Then my goal is to reduce the likelihood that you just say, this is stupid, this isn't worth my time, after you hit your first blocker or two. Because my goal is to kind of remove as many of those blockers as I can, before to kind of get you into the position where you can find your way around. But by no means am I going to be going extremely deep into complex concepts or anything like that. This is going to be a lot of surface level stuff that assumes you have some-ish programming experience. You know what variables are, you know what classes are, you know what inheritance is, stuff like that. But yeah, that is what I want to do. And I'm fully aware that it might not be for everyone. This video was completely unscripted with no outline or anything, so I'm aware that it's pretty long-winded. I tend to do that. But for all of the videos where I'm actually writing code and explaining things, I will have not a verbatim script that I'll read off, but I will have a thorough reference sheet on my other monitor, so I cover exactly what I wanted to cover and nothing more. So yeah, that is what will be happening on this channel moving forward. And yeah, that's about it. So I will go and make the first iteration of this now. But yeah, I'm really excited to do that. I think that if somehow people start coming across these videos, and that they can be helped by them, because that would have been great when I was picking it up, to be honest. So yeah,